got shot in the back, 3 more times over the heart, and then 1 last time in the neck.
A cold-hearted murder of a devoted mother living the American dream.
There's some sort of personal connection between the perpetrator and the victim to drive that level of violence.
A woman with many admirers, any one of them a suspect.
He said that it was going to be difficult for him to write poetry anymore because his muse was dead.
Was there some expectation on his part that she pay him back in some way? Maybe with romantic interest, or he was alone and it needed to be paid back quicker?
It's clear that a great deal of plotting and scheming went into this crime.
The truth will be revealed.
Now it all makes sense, and boom, we got him.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Frisco, Texas. Everything is bigger and better in this small town.
It was just a nice, quintessential town. It's a suburb of Dallas. There's fairly large houses, family town. It's kind of a close-knit community. The Dallas Cowboys are home here, so that's where they practice and train at. There's the minor league baseball team here for the Rangers. So Frisco is definitely a sports town.
It's a very safe community. It's friendly. It's diverse. It was rated one of the best places in America to live.
But on one chilly January morning, Frisco's peacefulness is rocked to its core.
On January 14th, we got a call, a welfare check from Henry Braxton. He wanted to check in on his girlfriend, Vanna. She hadn't shown up for their date, and she hadn't showed up to work all day, so he was concerned about her health and safety. Responding officers went to Anna's house. There was no answer at the door. Anna's son, Eager, met the officers at the house. Eager has a key, and they checked the house. Everything looked fine, looked like a normal, nice, well-kept house. Then they go in the garage, and that's when they find Anna's body. She was on the floor, like there was a little bit of blood. We discovered there's multiple gunshot wounds, and she was on her back with her body kind of twisted. It looked like she got shot in the back. She falls, kind of hits her car, falls down. That's what twists her. That's what puts her in the position that we find her at in the garage. The shooter then shoots her 3 more times over the heart, and then shoots her 1 last time in the neck. How she was shot with a contact wound, gunshot wound to the neck, it was like the shooter had some sort of emotional attachment and just couldn't shoot her in the face. But at the same time, they wanted her dead.
The victim is 42-year-old university administrator Anna Moses.
Anna was a very smart gal, ambitious, a real go-getter, and also a very devoted mom. I admired her so much. She trained as an engineer and economist, and if she was reading a book, she wasn't reading in Russian. She was reading in English, which is astonishing because, English was her second language.
Originally from Russia, Anna moved to Texas with her young son after marrying salesman Robert Moses.
Robert Moses had adopted Eager. He loved Eager, treated him like his own son, and cared for him. Robert and Anna had a happy marriage, but as the years went on, it appeared that their marriage started to decline. And eventually, both parties decided to enter into a divorce.
After Bob and Anna separated, he would come over to her house to help her with, like, if the washing machine was broken, things like that. He didn't seem angry with her. She didn't seem angry with him. Anna was doing extremely well. and she was happy.
Heading up the investigation into the murder of Anna Moses are Detective Brian Schutte and prosecutor Cynthia Walker. They begin by processing the crime scene.
In the garage, I see right next to her body is mail, and then there's a fast food kind of bag or wrapper, and her purse was there right next to her body as well. We find $300 cash inside the purse. It didn't appear to be rummaged through or anything like that. Nothing appeared to be missing.
This occurred in January, and it was a cold day. And as you would, getting out of your car, going into the house, still had her coat on, still had her scarf on. There was no sign of a struggle. But it appeared that she had probably stopped by her mailbox, pulled her mail, had it in her hand, and she was walking toward the inside of her house to go in, and then was ambushed by this shooter.
There's bullet casings in the garage. We found almost a dozen. It's overkill when you find 11 bullet casings for one person. Our home burglar is not going to shoot someone so many times typically. Usually they will shoot someone so that they can get away. In this case, it's some sort of intentional or planned murder.
As detectives survey the crime scene, they make a surprising realization.
Anna's car is missing in the driveway and it's not in the garage either. So we don't know where her car's at.
Did somebody kill her for the car? The police figure the person who killed Anna is probably with the car, and if they can locate it, that may lead them to where the killer is.
To find Anna's killer, detectives will need to unravel the final 24 hours of her life.
It was critical for us to get the timeline going. It establishes where the victim is and then who has contact with the victim and when they last had contact with them. And that timeline is going to be crucial for us figuring out who the killer is.
Investigators speak to Anna's 20-year-old son, Igor, a student at the University of Dallas, Frisco, the same university where Anna worked. They're hoping he can help fill in Anna's whereabouts in her final 24 hours.
Igor says he talked to his mother the day before, January 13th, but he hadn't talked to her that morning. So Igor went to her office to see if she was at school because he lived on campus, and she wasn't at her office.
Anna's work day typically ended at 5 p.m. Security cameras showed her car leaving the university parking garage at 5:07 p.m. At the scene, there was also a receipt that was close by her body that showed that Anna purchased a quesadilla at 5:37 p.m. The fast food place was on the major roadway that she would have been traveling on her way home.
Police check surveillance video from the fast food location and spot Anna at the drive-thru window at 5:37 p.m. She pays for her food, then leaves.
It appeared that she was alone in the car, though the vantage point wasn't perfect. We looked at the route that she would normally take home, and there was an elementary school further up the road. And so the officers got the security camera, and they saw at 5:46 p.m. a car that fit her description that was going the same direction toward her house. And so it was like, okay, she made it this far, just a few blocks from her home. And still, there was no evidence there was somebody else in the car with her at the time.
Police request the footage from all the other surveillance cameras in the area.
From the neighbor's surveillance cameras, they were able to tell that there was a car that passed at 5:49 p.m. We presume that that was Anna's vehicle as it approached her house. So we believe that she had arrived at her home about 5:50 p.m.
We go to Anna's house to check the alarm system, and we have an alarm technician tell us that the alarm was last set on January 13th at 8:29 a.m. and it was never disarmed. So the house was armed. She leaves for work on the 13th, comes home, never goes back into her house, and she was found dead in the garage. We're thinking that the killer came in through the garage and had access to the garage, and just kind of laid in wait and waited for Anna to get home, and that's when they shot her.
The time of death, the investigators believed, and I believed, it was about 5:50 p.m., but the way that she was shot, surprise, we assume that as soon as she arrived, about 5:50, somebody shot her almost immediately. So she never made it into her house.
Having established that Anna was killed at approximately 5:50 p.m., Detective Schutte asks Eager about anyone in Anna's life who might have wanted to harm her.
Eager said there was a man that Anna was dating and had been dating since the summer before she was killed. His mother and her boyfriend had a standing date night on Tuesday nights. On the day that Anna was killed, they were going to meet in the evening and have dinner.
Anna's boyfriend, Henry, is already on detectives' radar as someone they want to talk to. He was the person who first reported her missing. Detectives bring Henry in for questioning.
He has a dating relationship with the victim. We're trying to establish what kind of relationship they were in, and basically want to try to find out when he last saw and spoke to her.
We texted at noon to talk, to make sure she could talk, because she was at work and I was at work, so.
He seemed to be very forthcoming, very detailed. It appeared that he was trying to be very helpful. And the police looked to see if there had been any sort of major blow-ups and problems, but he said that Anna really, enjoyed their relationship, and really there wasn't anything.
But as soon as investigators leave the room, Henry transforms. He's captured on video, suddenly acting suspiciously.
He was nervous. He starts kind of mumbling and talking to himself. Henry's heard kind of saying, what did I do? Did I mess up or something like that? That's kind of an odd statement. So there's cause for concern. It raises the flag. We got to investigate further.
Whenever you see someone talking to oneself the way Henry does in the interview room when he thinks he's alone, of course, everyone's still listening, you have to ask yourself, why aren't those little details occurring during the interview itself? What is he hiding?
In the brutal murder of Anna Moses, investigators are zeroing in on her boyfriend, Henry. Concerned about his alarming transformation in the interrogation room, Detective Schutte decides to put Henry to the test.
We'd have a whole lot of evidence, so pretty much when we started talking to people, we were going to ask for DNA. So we asked Henry for consensual DNA, and he's kind of reluctant, kind of hesitant, and he said maybe he should get an attorney. It raises a red flag if someone doesn't want to cooperate with the investigation that should have an invested interest.
With Henry in their crosshairs, detectives focus on whether he had the opportunity to kill his girlfriend, Anna.
The night that Anna was murdered, Henry said he went to his daughter's school for an event. He was there from 6 until 7. At 7:03, Henry texted Anna that he was on his way to her house to take her out on the date.
I texted, I'm on my way, I'll be there in about a half an hour, because that's about how long it takes.
Henry said he showed up to the house around 7:37. Knocked on the door, no answer. Looked in the windows up front, there's no lights, nothing going on in the house that he can see. The garage door is closed. He's kind of banging on the door, making phone calls, sending Anna text messages, asking her where she's at, what's going on, but he can't get a hold of her at all.
I don't know what to do, so I ended up going home. And then I called periodically through the night and sent her a text again at like 11. So you never heard any text from her? No, not after we texted at noon.
The next day, Henry still hadn't heard from Anna. That's when he called police, asking them to check in on her.
We look into Henry's alibi, and at the time that Anna's murder happened, the CCTV at his daughter's school had his Jeep on camera as being there, so Henry was at that school during the time frame of her murder. We believe she died between 5:50 and 6 p.m. So there's no way that Henry could have killed Anna because there's no physical way he could get to his daughter's school in 10 minutes. It's impossible. So during the investigation, we're able to rule out Henry as a suspect.
While Henry turns out to be a dead end, investigators soon have a new lead.
We got the call that they located Anna's car. We were pretty ecstatic because there could be evidence that we needed that could be crucial to this investigation. The car's located a couple streets away from Anna's house. It's parked legally on the side of the street.
Detectives set to work, processing Anna's car.
They found a Red Bull can and a very weathered cigarette bud that was on the side of the seat. They thought that was unusual. One, because Anna didn't smoke. Two, because she tried to keep her car very clean. She was kind of meticulous in how she dressed and kept her house and her car. And so this was unlike her.
We also found blood on the inside of the car, and we're thinking this could be our huge break in the case. Analysts find a blood stain on the back seat and bottom of the seat, and it looks like it could marry up with when you put your seatbelt on, and then on the center console there's a little drop of blood. It was bright red in color. It didn't appear to be an old stain or smudge. It appeared to be fresh. We're thinking as long as that blood does not match Anna Moses, then that will be our killer.
But when the forensics come in, the results take investigators by surprise.
We found 3 different DNA profiles in the car. The first genetic markers indicate Anna Moses. The second, unidentified male. And then the third was a mixture of Anna's DNA and an unknown male's. The fact that there's 2 unknown males, it could mean that there's 2 different people there to murder her.
Investigators check the DNA samples from the car against their database, but they don't get any matches.
It's pretty frustrating because we didn't know who the suspect was, so it's just another kind of roadblock in the investigation. But we have to keep moving. We can't let the trail go cold. This was my first big murder case, and I am a big problem solver. I like working towards that goal of finding who the killer is.
Searching for new leads, Detective Schutte takes a closer look at Anna's personal life.
We look into Anna's computer and different social media things. We end up finding a person named Jerry, and Jerry had written some poems for Anna and had actually published a poetry book. Anna had a copy at her house. We're kind of shocked because, there's some pretty strong feelings and poetry in that. So the best thing was for us to go talk to Jerry.
Anna told me that Jerry was such an artist. I never got any sense that there was any kind of sexual relationship. It was more like some kind of very deep spiritual bond.
As detectives dig deeper, they discover Jerry seemed obsessed with Anna, emailing and calling her multiple times a day.
He described Anna as his muse, which shows, pretty strong emotional connections and ties. If someone has pretty strong feelings, enough to write a poetry book and get it published about a person, we're going to look into that person and see if maybe those feelings were reciprocated or not, and what their relationship was all about. Investigators didn't know if Jerry knew about Henry or if there was a resentment because she had a boyfriend.
If there's that level of interest on Jerry's part, and you could see how there could be a jealousy or there could be anger. Is there something that had happened? And so the police had to look to see, did Jerry commit the crime? Did he kill Anna Moses?
In Anna Moses' murder, detectives are zeroing in on a new suspect, an admirer and poet named Jerry. When investigators question him about Anna, he gets emotional.
I can't bring her back, but I want justice for her.
Jerry was hit pretty hard with Anna's murder, breaking down, crying, sobbing. Jerry said that it was going to be difficult for him to write poetry anymore because his muse was dead. It's a little odd where someone kind of makes it about themselves that I won't be able to write anymore. Jerry said he and Anna met at like a speaking group, public speaking, where people who want to better themselves in public speaking can join this group and then get up and they give different speeches. Anna was primarily taking that class to try to get rid of some of her Russian accent. Jerry said he liked her accent and didn't want her to change it, and that's how they first met.
I could honestly say Anna is a very attractive person and sweet and beautiful, but I was just trying to be anything I could be to be a friend.
She Jerry would go to the opera with Anna. He would go do things with her that was real, kind of artsy.
When Detective Schutte presses Jerry for more details about his relationship with Anna, there's a surprising revelation.
I've been married since 73, so then, I've come to points where I felt like, let me out of here, we've stuck with it.
He tells us, I have a wife, and my wife knows about Anna, and it seemed like Jerry really liked Anna, but he was married and committed to someone else. There's indicators that Jerry didn't want, his wife or Anna's boyfriend to know everything that they were doing together. Clearly, there's an emotional attachment. Jealousy or lover scorn could be a motive, but we don't know if the opportunity is there for him to actually have done this. Jerry's alibi is that he was at his house all night with his wife. Jerry tells us he got off of work around 5 and went straight home. So we go try to vet the information he tells us. We look at toll tag information to verify his whereabouts. We confirm that on Tuesday the 13th, Jerry leaves his work at 5 p.m. and is tracked along the tollway until he gets home around 6 p.m., where he's there all night. We believe Anna was killed between 5:50 and 5:55 p.m. on the 13th. There's no possible way Jerry could have made it to Anna's house at the time frame she was killed.
The police could corroborate his alibi, which is that he was traveling home in a different area, and his car was hitting the different tollway gates. And so there just wasn't anything to substantiate making Jerry a suspect anymore.
With another suspect ruled out, detectives broadened the scope of their investigation to the university where Anna worked.
We interviewed Anna's co-workers just to see if they could describe any possible motive or suspect that might help us out. They let us know that she had a mentor that worked at the university.
Investigators learned that Anna had a special relationship with this mentor, Dr. Workowski.
We know he's a professor at the university for mathematics. We wanted to make sure we just talked to him and see what the relationship was.
Dr. Workowski stated that at this stage in his life and in Anna's that they were close friends. He's almost 30 years older than Anna.
He talks about Anna like he's very fond of her. It's someone he really likes. The doctor had a sweet little nickname for Anna, my little butterfly in Russian.
Investigators pressed Dr. Workowski for more details about his relationship with Anna.
He tells us at one point he did have a special love interest with her. They kissed at one point, but he said he cut it off because of his age difference. And then he advised that he would kind of help out Anna from time to time. In fact, even help pay for Eager's college. He had given Anna about $40,000.
He also had recently given her an additional $6,000. That's a lot of money. Police had to look at that.
We asked him why he would do that, and he basically said that he didn't want to give his money to a charity that he'd never see how it helped people. He would rather give his money to his friends and actually see how it impacted their life for the better, see how happy it made them.
Was there some expectation on his part that she, pay him back in some way, whether it was a romantic interest or maybe it was a loan and she didn't pay back quicker, or something that he would feel enraged by?
It's possible that he wants to help her and he's giving money to her for that reason. It's also possible that money's being exchanged for another purpose. Maybe he wants something in return. Maybe he doesn't get what's promised. Or perhaps Anna has some information and then she's expecting more money from him. These things are entirely possible.
Also, Dr. Workowski is a smoker, and we found a cigarette in the car. So that was just another odd piece of the puzzle.
With suspicion now swirling around the professor, police ask him about his activities on January 13th, the day Anna was killed.
Dr. Workowski advised on the 13th he was at work, had spoke to Anna a couple times that day. They had tea together around 2:30. He was the last person that we knew talked to her before her death. We asked how that conversation was. I think he said just normal conversation, just friends talking. He told us he finished up his day, then went home, and he arrived home around 5:45. We go through the toll tag records. to verify where his car was, if it went the right direction or what direction it was traveling, and when it was traveling. Dental records showed everything he said to be right on, based on where he lives and where Anna lives. It's not possible to get from his house at 5:45 to Anna's house at 5:50 to murder her. Dr. Workowski provided consensual DNA sample. We turned that sample over to the lab. Nothing came back as a match. His DNA sample exonerates him, so we have no reason to believe Dr. Workowski is a suspect.
With Dr. Workowski no longer a suspect, investigators find themselves back at square one.
It's just kind of frustrating when you're working these cases, and it's just, you keep running into these roadblocks. It's hard knowing that a killer's walking the streets. We need to try to figure out and find who the killer is.
Having exhausted all their leads, detectives go back to the drawing board looking for anything that could help point them to Anna Moses' killer.
We did a search warrant on her house, and we located Anna's life insurance policy. It was for $650,000, and it was designated to go to Eager, her son.
Eager was the most important thing to Anna, and if anything ever happened to her, she wanted to make sure that he was going to be taken care of. But if Anna was out of the picture, Eager, he would be in a much better position financially than if she had been alive.
Well, as the cliche goes, people might say follow the money. And in this case, when it's learned that there is an insurance policy and the beneficiary is Anna's son, clearly that's cause for concern in terms of, could the crime have been committed to obtain this money?
With Anna's son Eager now in their crosshairs, investigators bring him down to the station for questioning.
When you're interviewing someone, you do look around and kind of see what their body language is. It's not only what they say, but how they say it and their demeanor, things like that. And at that time, Eager just kind of raised a little flag, like, hey, this is different. He doesn't really express himself, and you can't get a read off of him because it's just nothing there. Eager had some kind of weird comment about his mom's murder. He asked, was she all in one piece? And it was kind of strange. We're like, well, why would you think she wasn't in one piece? It was just an odd statement. When we first told him that, his mother had been killed, he went and played sports with his friends in college. So it just kind of perked our interest on kind of where Eager's mindset was and what was going on with him.
Detectives hone in on Eager's whereabouts during the time Anna was killed.
On the 13th, Eager said he was in class from 5:30 to 6:45 that night, and that he went and got some food at the little campus bistro, and then went back to class from 7 to 9:45 that night. We went and interviewed people from Eager's classes that said they saw him there at the times that he said he was at class, and we were able to pull up a transaction from him at the campus bistro, along with him on the CCTV. So he pretty much was eliminated as a suspect based on his timeline and the events that we saw.
Before police let Eager go, investigators ask about the insurance money. Eager mentions that his father, Robert, is managing Anna's assets.
It appeared that Robert Moses had a very close relationship with his son. Even though Eager was an adult, Robert would have had a lot of control over where that insurance money went. Also, the home that used to be Robert's and Anna's, when they divorced, Anna got the home and Robert moved out.
And we found out the day after Anna died, Bob moves into her house. And her body wasn't even cold in the ground, and he moves into her house. That's a huge red flag for us.
While everybody is devastated and upset, his interest was all about the money, and he would say that he was doing it for Eager's benefit. But it just struck people as particularly off-putting and inappropriate.
Talking with Anna's close friends, investigators uncover more unsettling information about her ex-husband.
Bob Moses. He had low self-esteem, and he covered it up by appearing confident, even arrogant or cocky. He always was acting like he was a real authority. So he seemed like the kind of guy who liked to be in the thick of things, but he wasn't devoted to some kind of career or calling. He was Anna's Svengali, he thought. Bob apparently had told Anna, "You'll never be able to make it on your own," because when she first came to this country, she was really pretty dependent on Bob, and I think he liked it that way.
While Anna focused on her education and building her career, Robert's career was sinking.
There was a pattern. Bob getting a job, getting fired, getting another job, not liking it, quitting. It had happened several times. And it was bothering Anna because she was not like that at all. Eventually, she didn't need him anymore. In fact, she was doing better than he had been doing when they first met. I'm sure it drove Bob crazy.
In my mind, Robert is resenting Anna, both in terms of her ability to move on with her life and also financially. And I wonder if Robert also may have some over-controlled hostility, and that he might be the type of person who takes these resentments that pile up until one day he might explode with anger. And when he does, it can be excessive. This could be a motive for murder in this case.
One of Anna's friends tells investigators Bob was violent in their relationship, and the situation reached a boiling point.
Anna came over to her house crying and kind of frantic because Bob had pushed her down the stairs and had basically assaulted her. Anna had actually broke her wrist from that incident, and we were able to get a copy of the medical records from the hospital, and we had photographs of her at an event with the cast on. So that's putting the spotlight on Bob now.
As investigators move Bob to the top of their list of suspects, his motive comes more into focus.
Bob was not doing well at all, financially. Anna had gotten the house in the divorce, so he had to rent a room in a house with like 3 or 4 other grown men. I mean, what 62-year-old man wants to have 3 or 4 roommates? That has to be depressing. It was like his life was spiraling down, hers was spiraling up. She was dating. She had tons and tons of friends. She was taking courses. She had a good, solid job. And I think it just ate away at Bob.
When I start diving into Bob's financials, oh boy, there's a lot of debt. And he's at that age where he can't recover from that type of debt. Anna has this big chunk of change from a life insurance policy. Bob is in serious financial debt. Seems like there's this nexus between these two people. It's a red flag for us because Anna was killed, and the only one benefiting off of her death at that moment is Bob Moses.
After a series of false starts and dead ends, investigators now have a prime suspect in Anna Moses' murder. Her ex-husband, Robert.
We bring Bob in and talk to him, sit down, have a good interview. Then we see like a little scratch on his right hand above his knuckle. We ask him about it.
What happened to your hand there? Oh, my dog, I was trying to put the covers on the bed this morning. He jumped up on the bed before I had the cover. I said, no, get down. I put him down and went to the end. I ran into the desk, my room, the corner of the desk, and just kind of cut my hand there.
It was this kind of long, drawn-out answer to like a simple question. And it's been my training experience when someone answers a question like that, it's the person thinking of a way to tell a lie, and they're making it up as they go and hoping you believe it. And we're like, wow, that's pretty fresh. He showed it to us, and it's a small little cut. And then we asked him, hey, can we take a DNA sample? He cooperated with that part of the investigation.
Yeah. So I want you to go ahead and rub it on your left cheek. Yeah.
Many guilty offenders have voluntarily given DNA, including some serial killers, who, as part of their confidence game, will turn over a hair or even provide blood, hoping that by appearing cooperative, that they're less suspicious-looking.
Police continue their interrogation, questioning Robert about his relationship with Anna.
When's the last time you were by her house? Well, Eager was out of school, so I was over there, I don't know. Maybe it was last week. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think.
He was very kind of vague in general. Instead of a direct answer, he would kind of move around the answer and talk about something else that didn't have anything to do with the question. And so they felt that was pretty odd.
With Robert's evasiveness setting off alarm bells, detectives push him on his whereabouts in the hours leading up to Anna's murder.
He tells us that he was at work, and then that night, I was on the computer, I was watching TV, and I went to a restaurant. It's kind of a place where girls don't wear a whole lot of clothes, and they serve beer and bar food there, and he's kind of a regular there.
Investigators check into Robert's story.
So I follow up with his work. Well, his work says, Bob hadn't really been coming to work, and, he's pretty much going to be fired because he's not producing any business. So that was very strange to us because he told us he was at work.
He lived in a rental home with 3 other men. They checked, and talking to those other men, no one could say, hey, Robert Moses was at home around 5:50 p.m. on January 13th.
We go to the restaurant that he said he went to. We review the video, and we verify him walking into the restaurant at 7 o'clock. He's there for about an hour and then leaves. But before 7 p.m., we cannot locate or pinpoint where Bob's at. We got all this information on Bob, but it doesn't mean that he necessarily murdered Anna. But we do have DNA that's waiting to be processed. So at this point, we are waiting to see if Bob's DNA comes back a match to the DNA that was taken from Anna's car.
When the DNA results come back, they confirm the blood found at Anna's car is Robert's blood.
The blood stain on the console was a mixture of Bob's and Anna's DNA. So that ties Bob to the crime scene. That is a huge win for us because now we have the killer. Now it all makes sense. Everything matches what we think is happening. And boom, we got him.
In Robert's eyes, he was a benefactor and even a savior for Anna. He gave her a new life. And in his mind probably thought that he could do no wrong and to some degree owned her. And when she sort of goes out on her own and things didn't work out according to plan, we see that maybe he could never get over that. And the rage just began to fester and boil, and this murder ends up being sort of the final actualization of an anger streak that began years earlier.
With this last piece of the puzzle in place, investigators are now able to fill in the final 24 hours of Anna's life.
On January 13th, Anna had left work around 5 p.m., traveled north on a major roadway, stopped at a fast food restaurant, purchased a quesadilla, drove to her house.
Bob got into the garage, lays in wait. Anna comes home, gets her mail, pulls in the garage at 5:50, closes the door. Bob pops up, boom, 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 shoots her several times. She falls down, and then he comes up to her and shoots her 3 more times over the heart. He didn't shoot her in the face because there's kind of this emotional attachment, but he does shoot her in the throat. That was the finishing shot, just to make sure she was dead.
He's the one who got into the car and then moved it. We don't know exactly when he parked it, but it was found 2 blocks away from the house.
We believe that Bob Moses disables the gun, probably in pieces, or he throws the gun in a trash can or a sewer.
After killing Anna, Robert heads to a nearby restaurant to give himself an alibi.
We interviewed the waitress, and she was like, he made the comment, like, this is the greatest grilled cheese sandwich I've ever eaten. When I look back at it, I think that he said that because he was still kind of high on the adrenaline and like he just got away with murder.
The only question left is how the energy drink can and cigarette butt ended up in Anna's car, bringing with them the second set of unidentified male DNA.
We have to question if this wasn't part of Robert's way to throw off the investigation. He could grab a can out of a trash can or a cigarette butt on the side of the road and throw it in the car, and that DNA, who knows where that would come from. It would have absolutely nothing to do with this case.
It's clear by Robert's actions that a great deal of plotting and scheming went into this crime. To come up with a whole narrative and to actually move the car to that location, it has a theatrical quality to it that you very rarely see in the case of a domestic murder.
On February 26, 2015, Robert Moses is arrested for the first-degree murder of his ex-wife, Anna.
Bob was very emotional, so I'm sure that some people thought, oh, well, he couldn't have done it because he was crying. But of course, it's not always the case. Just because you cry, it doesn't mean you're not lying.
There was no doubt in my mind that we had the right person. I knew the detectives felt the same way.
The jury agrees and convicts Robert of murder and sentences him to life in prison.
The timeline was critical. The timeline helped us in determining there's no way this person could be involved because they were on the other side of town. There's no way this person could be involved because they were at this place when the murder allegedly happened. Looking back at all the timeline, the only one who has a big, glaring hole in their story is Bob Moses.
Whenever there's a murder case, you want to do your best and to make sure the perpetrator is held and that justice is served for the victim and the victim's family. In this case, justice was served.
Anna certainly wasn't what you'd call plain vanilla. I miss Anna's laughter, and I miss sharing things with Anna. I went to St. Petersburg for the first time, and it would have been great to have gotten to go with Anna and, share that experience with her. I felt lucky that I met this interesting woman with this interesting background, and now that Anna's on, it brings me to tears. She was very beloved by many, many people.
She was a mother, 8-year-old triplets, and she was face down on the couch, strangled to death.
It's likely that whoever killed her was somebody who knew her and was conversing with her and then would have blown into a rage and attacked her.
A brutal murder with strange clues left behind.
The scar case was a genuine whodunit.
Who would want this cherished mother of 3 dead? At the foot of Mount Rainier in Washington lies Puyallup, a quaint, peaceful town with nature trails and tree-lined streets.
Puyallup is a smaller town. It's an old town. It has some nice scenery. You move here for the schools and the parks and for your kids. Puyallup is a safe town. It's going to have a lower crime rate. It's not the kind of place where you expect to see a lot of violent crime.
But in August 2001, on a day like any other, police get a worrying call about one of the town's newest residents.
Dana Laskowski worked as a nanny for 2 doctors, and she was scheduled to arrive at 7:30 in the morning at work, and she didn't show up. This was very unusual for her. She was very reliable, so her employers called us, and we responded out to her house to check her welfare.
About 11 in the morning, the police arrive at Dana's residence to just make sure that she's okay. Knock on the door, and there's no answer. They did a perimeter check, and they looked in the windows and tried to see if they could see anything, and they didn't notice anything. But they did find that the back door was open, and so they went ahead and entered the house.
Our officers came in calling Dana's name and then found her on the couch in the living room. She was underneath blankets. She was in a position where her head was resting on her arm, and then her other arm, we found it behind her back. She was deceased.
Police will always do at least a cursory examination of the body to see where the injuries might be. for any kind of things like stab wounds or gunshot wounds. There were nothing like that. But they did notice injuries to her throat, ligature marks. And there was a scarf close by, which indicated that she'd been strangled. At this point, it's a homicide investigation.
But who would want to kill 36-year-old Dana Laskowski?
Dana was a mother with 8-year-old triplets, and she had a niece, Amanda, that she felt like a mother to, and said, you can come and go here however you please, and so can your friends, and if you need anything from me, I'll be there.
When she'd walk into a room, she would get to know everybody in the room. Everybody would like her. She was very outgoing, very personable.
She was always somebody that had a kind word or a kind deed for everybody.
Tasked with investigating Dana's murder are veteran detective Scott Bramhall and prosecuting attorney Stephen Penner.
There are certainly crime scenes, homicide scenes, where there's, blood spatter, a victim on the ground, visible injuries, maybe a disruption all around the room. That wasn't the case here. There wasn't any blood, no weapons. There wasn't anything really broken. She was face down on the couch.
When police turn Dana over, they find bruising on her neck and dried blood around her nose and ears.
The medical examiner ruled that the cricoid cartilage of her throat was fractured, so it's a crushing injury to the throat.
Dana died from being strangled to death, probably with her own scarf. It's possible to strangle somebody with your hands, but like any tool, a ligature makes it easier. If you're behind them with a ligature, it can be very difficult to get the ligature off the throat. And even if you can dig your fingers in between the ligature and your throat, it won't stop the compression of the airway. In this particular case, it appeared that the scarf that could have been used to strangle Dana to death. So the police searched for any kind of trace evidence, DNA, bodily fluids, something that they could use to try to identify the killer. They looked for everything they could and they didn't find anything. We kept going back to Dana's body, where it was found, and what position it was in. Her arm up behind her back, face down on the couch, strangled to death. It suggested that there was a struggle. Whoever did this had enough strength to overpower someone who's literally fighting for their life.
The crime indicated the offender was strong, somebody with upper body strength. So we were assuming the offender would be a male.
To find Dana's killer, Detective Bramhall must reconstruct the final 24 hours of her life, starting with the crime scene.
There were abrasions to Dana Laskowski's knees and elbows, and they would be an indication that Dana Laskowski was not killed on the couch, that it was likely that there was a possible struggle on the floor. We were able to process the carpet with luminol. What we did was we marked on the rug the location of the luminol illuminations, and that formed a pattern. The pattern would be an indication that Dana was killed on the floor. The person that killed her would have then picked her up, placed her on the couch, and then covered her up.
Investigators believe the killer was trying to make the body more comfortable after death, an example of undoing behavior.
Undoing is a type of psychological defense mechanism. We all have such mechanisms. In this case, the fact that she was covered with a blanket may indicate that somebody had engaged in undoing behavior to cancel out or counteract the murder. You could read some remorse or guilt into undoing behavior. It implies that there's some sort of relationship here between the killer and the victim.
That would indicate that the killer was someone who had affection for Dana. This isn't a random burglar who broke in and accidentally found her. This is somebody maybe who knew her. And that's important as you develop suspects.
Then, police receive significant information about the timeline of Dana's murder.
The medical examiner was able to approximate that Dana had been there for a few hours before the police arrived, and most likely had died in the early hours of that morning.
We knocked on the neighbors' doors, and one said that they reported hearing a woman screaming during the night. They estimated that time at about 1 a.m. So that gave us a time frame.
We knew by 7:30 that morning Dana probably was dead because she didn't show up for her job.
Having established Dana was killed between the hours of 1 and 7:30 a.m., police start looking into Dana's background for clues about her murder.
Dana was a mother. She had 3 young children, 8-year-old triplets, living with her. But at the time that Dana was murdered, they were with Steve, her husband. She had been recently separated. And police were able to establish that she had started dating. What that does is that just increases the universe of people who might be suspects. The people that Dana would let into her house late at night that she would think that she was safe with, when it turned out that she wasn't.
Detectives asked Dana's employers if Dana had concerns about any of the men she'd been dating.
The people that she worked for as a nanny told the police that Dana had mentioned a man, Adam, who they had termed as kind of a stalker.
Dana had just moved into her house, and Adam ran a bucket truck for a cable company, and Adam had come to install some cable.
When the job was done, Adam asked Dana out on a date. She wasn't interested, but that didn't stop him from pursuing her.
Adam was the guy who wouldn't take no for an answer and wouldn't leave her alone. His behavior escalated. Dana reported getting notes on her door, flowers, gifts, and he was surveilling her while she was at home, and then calls and texts that just wouldn't stop. By all indications, this was obsessive, controlling, angry behavior, which would make it more credible that this person might be able to get to the mental state, the emotional state, to kill somebody.
Then, what police learn next increases their interest in Adam as a suspect even further.
Dana's employers told us that Dana had said that if anything happened to her, it would be this cable guy. We find that significant, and we take that very seriously.
If she was scared enough to tell people that he might do something to me, something violent, and then something did happen to her, that, of course, raised concerns by the police.
At that point, Adam becomes the prime suspect.
Police are closing in on a suspect, a cable installer named Adam, who had been stalking Dana Laskowski in the weeks leading up to her murder.
Adam seemed to have a motive, seemed to have a behavior that would suggest that he was likely the killer.
We were focused on Adam as a prime suspect. And we got search warrants on his vehicle, bucket truck, on his locker at work, and we took him into custody. He was belligerent. He was very uncooperative and insisted he wasn't the one that killed her.
Detectives then press Adam about where he was the night Dana was killed.
On the night of the murder, he said he was at home hanging out with his friends.
Searches through Adam's phone records show he was at home that night.
Based on his alibi as he gave it and the way it checked out, he was moved down on the list of suspects for our investigation.
The police really thought Adam was the one who had killed Dana because of the stalking behavior, but now they have to turn their attention and resources to other suspects.
Investigators shift their focus to a small clue found at the crime scene.
Dana Laskowski had a phone number written on her hand in ink, and some of that was faded. But we looked at that phone number and looked at identifying whose phone number it was.
When police check the phone number, they determine it belongs to a 35-year-old man named Julian.
The phone number linked to Julian opens up a realm of possibilities as to his potential motive. This speaks to a certain degree of intimacy. The fact that it's taken down in this manner suggests that that number was important to her.
Detectives track down Julian and bring him in for questioning. They ask why his phone number would be on Dana's hand.
He was not really answering. I thought that was a little odd, so we kind of zeroed in on his relationship with Dana.
Julian tells investigators Dana was dating his best friend Matt, but Julian seems nervous.
When we confronted Julian and asked him if he also had a relationship with Dana, he acknowledged that. So it turns out that they were having an affair.
With this startling revelation, detectives now wonder if Julian could be Dana's killer. They question where he was the night of the murder.
Julian said he was at a bar on the night that Dana was murdered. Said he was there about from 10:30 at night till past 1 a.m. Checking into the bar management seemed to indicate that that was consistent with the truth. He was with a group of friends. His friends vouched for him being there. So his alibi didn't put him anywhere near Dana's house that night.
With Julian's alibi ruling him out as Dana's killer, detectives question if their affair gave his friend Matt a motive for murder.
Dana's killer would be the kind of person who she wouldn't think twice about having in her house, but also could be the kind of person who might be jealous and could get angry enough to strangle her to death. Romantic relationships can lead to that kind of intensity of feelings. Of course, they don't all do, but a lot of times when you see that type of crime, that's the situation. The nature of this killing was very personal. And so Matt, who seemed to be kind of a primary boyfriend for Dana, naturally became a suspect.
Armed with Julian's information, investigators dig deeper into Dana and Matt's relationship.
We were told Matt was very much in love with Dana, and Dana liked Matt, but was less into Matt than Matt was into Dana.
In this case, we have one person in this relationship is clearly more invested than the other. On top of that, he discovers that she's sleeping with his best friend. That automatically interjects a degree of obvious jealousy and resentment.
Dana's phone records reveal that she spoke with Matt repeatedly the night she was killed.
According to the phone records, Dana had been on the phone with her boyfriend, Matt, talking to him a few times between 11:30 and midnight.
When detectives ask Dana's friends about Matt, they learn he's a rough type of guy.
We were being told by Dana's friends and associates and family that Matt was a biker and a person that used hard drugs, the person who could fight. He was a person we were told he could fight 10 men at once, and so we looked at him as a very good suspect. It's possible Matt found out about the affair and went and confronted Dana because he felt that he had been jilted. And during that confrontation, flew into a rage, killing Dana.
In the murder of Dana Laskowski, investigators have zeroed in on her boyfriend Matt, who they learn is based just outside of Vancouver, Canada.
The fact that Matt lived in Canada, that alone wouldn't eliminate him as a suspect. Puyallup's only about a 3 or 4 hour drive.
So we went up to Canada to look into him. And when we arrived, we met with them, explained what we were there for, asked him where he was on the night that Dana was murdered.
When Matt is questioned, he denies having any involvement in Dana's death.
Matt said he tried to get down to Puyallup to visit Dana on the night that she died, but he was stopped at the border because he had a suspended license and was not allowed entry into the country.
So Matt told the police that at the time that Dana was murdered, he was at the Canadian border crossing and could not have been the one who had committed the murder.
We looked into it, and we could verify that he was where he said he was.
All of that was documented, not by Matt, but by the border officials. It was about as good as an alibi as you could get. It was, in fact, backed up by the government.
With Matt cleared as a suspect, investigators ask him for any information that could lead to Dana's killer.
Matt said that he was on the phone with Dana on the night of the murder, and she seemed a little bit inhibited by some of her conversation. And that suggested that Dana might have had somebody in the house
Matt suggests the mystery person could have been Dana's estranged husband, Steve.
Steve would certainly be a natural person to go talk to. And this was someone she'd shared part of her life with. But the state of being separated is a difficult state to be in emotionally. And depending on what else was going on, it could lead to that kind of anger that was necessary for this killing.
Steve might be jilted and angry enough to kill her, or they may just have had a planned meeting to exchange the children. Could have erupted into a spontaneous argument which led to the murder. All of these were possibilities that we had to look into.
Detectives dig into Steve and discover he took out a life insurance policy on Dana.
The factor of a life insurance policy would be a motive for murder for financial reasons. We also felt that passion, jealousy, anger at having the family split up would be a possible motive for him wanting to kill Dana.
With Dana's ex-husband in their crosshairs, detectives bring him down to the station for questioning.
As we talked to Steve about his relationship with Dana, he was found to be unusually locked up and reserved in his emotions. Kind of a flat affect. He was not very expressive.
Then, detectives notice another suspicious detail.
It was noted that he had abrasions to his knees, and Dana had abrasions to her knees and elbows. We felt that the two of them might have scuffled together on the night that she was murdered. When we asked Steve about the abrasions to his knees, he said he got them playing baseball. But then one of the detectives that was there happens to be a real baseball fan, and he said it was his opinion that those abrasions were not consistent with injuries that you get playing baseball. At that point, Steve really moved up at the top of the list of suspects.
But did Steve have the opportunity to kill Dana?
When we asked Steve where he was on the night of the murder, he said he was at home 5 hours away from Puyallup. He said he put the kids in bed, went out and gassed up the vehicle, got up the next morning, and drove to a local campsite.
His alibi is interesting. The fact that the triplets are conveniently out of the house for the murder, that could be a coincidence. It could also speak to planning, and that the children couldn't be there for that particular day because he had plans for her.
The round trip from where Steve lived to where Dana lived is 10 hours. So we really looked at the possibility of Steve being able to put the kids in bed and drive to Puyallup, kill Dana, turn around and drive back. Or have the kids in the car asleep, drive to Puyallup, kill Dana, and drive back.
If Steve did make the trip to Dana's house, investigators know he would have needed to stop for gas along the way.
We retraced the steps and the route that Steve would have taken, checked for possible places where Steve might have gassed up. We checked the surveillance cameras, any indicators along the roadway that would have picked up his car. There was no evidence to support the theory that Steve made that route.
Not finding any evidence connecting Steve to the crime, investigators rule him out as a suspect.
Now they eliminated all the suspects, and when they did that, the investigation kind of hit a brick wall. It was the source of frustration for them.
We had reached a point in the investigation where we didn't have a very good suspect, a very good plausible explanation as to exactly how the homicide occurred. We were kind of at an impasse, and with the positioning of Dana, the way she was covered with blankets afterwards, that's very unusual offender behavior. So I felt it was necessary for an FBI profile to be done on the case. So I contacted the FBI.
The local police department may not be able to say, hey, I've seen this behavior in the past. Hey, I've seen this indicator in the past for all the other homicides we had. The FBI brings that background, that experience, and that knowledge to help the police identify additional suspects.
5 months into the investigation, the FBI offers up a new theory, that Dana's murder wasn't planned, but happened in the heat of the moment.
The FBI said that the person who came to Dana's house that night did not come to the house to kill her, and it's likely that whoever killed her was somebody who knew her, who was conversing with her, and then would have flown into a rage and attacked her.
The police looked at the estranged husband. They'd looked at the boyfriend. They'd looked at the stalker. Now the police had to figure out new suspects who weren't as obvious. Somebody did this. They just had to figure out who that was.
Armed with new information from the FBI, investigators expand their search in the brutal murder of Dana Laskowski.
So now we were looking for somebody who was prone to flying into a rage, had upper body strength, maybe somebody that Dana would have rebuffed in advance from.
Looking for new leads, detectives examine the video footage from Dana's funeral.
It was important to see who went to the funeral, but it was also important to see how people acted at the funeral.
From a psychological standpoint, you want to see A, who's in attendance, B, how they're responding. It's entirely possible that the killer is present. When you think about most people being killed by someone they know, odds are that those persons or people are going to be at the funeral because it would be socially unacceptable not to. And then how do they manage that situation? Is there something that could reveal themselves and their involvement to investigators?
As police look through the guest book, they make an unexpected discovery.
Loved ones wrote comments in there such as, they miss Dana. They can't believe she's passed away. They miss her dearly, think about her often. Then there was an entry from a niece, and she said, I'm sorry I wasn't a better niece. I've been clean and sober 34 days now. It's all because of you. And some of the family members described the niece as unruly and wild. But the entry told us that the niece had gone clean and sober after Dana's death.
But even more importantly, she was doing it for Dana, which showed two things. One was her love for Dana, but it also showed that she felt guilt for some reason for her aunt's death. And that was important. It suggested that she may have been involved either shortly before or even during or after, somehow.
Detective Bramhall sets his sights on Dana's niece, Amanda.
I called Amanda, but I asked her to come in for an interview.
And Amanda, we're talking about the death of your Aunt Dana.
Yes.
I know this is hard for you.
Amanda tells the detective that she and her aunt were close, almost like mother and daughter. She adds that Dana was always there for her and her friends.
Amanda and her friends, they call themselves the Park Rats, which we on the police department are well familiar with. They're kids that hang out at Pioneer Park. And they're kids that don't have good homes. They don't have a stable home environment. And drug use is their common bond as they're hanging out in the park.
This whole group was like right out of high school. They didn't really have plans. I think high school was behind them. They didn't know what was ahead of them. They weren't home doing their homework. They weren't helping little ladies across the street. It's a nice town, but to the extent that there was a rough group, this was that group. Dana tried to be a safe place for Amanda and her friends. Amanda could go to Dana's place, no questions asked, any time of day or night, and she could bring her friends if she needed to. That was significant when the police remembered Dana's back door was unlocked that night.
Investigators ask Amanda what she knows about her aunt's murder and quickly get a lead.
So she gave me the list of names of the people that had been in the house, and she did kind of focus on one individual, Zane. She describes Zane as somebody with a lot of upper body strength and bit of temper. Zane is somebody who dealt in marijuana.
Then, Amanda makes an even more alarming statement.
Amanda went in to describe how Zane made an advance at her, and she rebuffed him, and that he bent her over the couch and was being physical.
He tried to come on to me, and I was like, what are you doing? Get away from me. And he proceeded to act like he was, pounding me from behind and like holding my head down, and I'm like, stop. I mean, screaming, and he wouldn't stop. And then I remember, he thought it was funny and he was laughing, and has a lot of strength and he could hold me down.
This was almost consistent with the murder as we understood it. I undertake a look at Zane, and I look in our files. He's got a criminal history, dealing in drugs, violence. So he was enough in the criminal element to be a very good suspect.
Detective Bramhall reaches out to one of his younger informants to see what he knows about Zane.
I had to sit down with him, and I talked to him about the murder of Amanda's aunt. And I suggested to him that Zane would be a good likely suspect. And he looked at me and he said, Zane didn't kill Amanda's aunt. Emily killed Amanda's aunt. Everybody knows that.
One of the people in Amanda's group was a young woman named Emily. Emily is 17. She's living on the streets or close to it. She's using drugs. Amanda and Emily were very close, maybe best friends.
Detective Bramhall is familiar with Emily from her troubles with the law in her past.
I said to this person, are you telling me that Emily, this little 5'2" girl, strangled a 36-year-old mother of 3? And he said, your records are old. Emily is not a skinny little 5'2" girl. She is very muscular. She has a picture of her biceps hanging from a rearview mirror. We call her mutant because she likes to wrestle and fight with the guys.
But you can imagine the police were a little bit hesitant to believe that that was the case, really. Because, again, somebody had overpowered Dana fighting for her life. Emily's not a normal suspect.
Detective Bramhall digs into the story that Emily Lauenborg could be Dana's killer.
As they started to interview these park rats, one of the things that started to come out was that maybe the toughest of all of them was Emily. And that Emily would win arm wrestling and even regular wrestling, and that she had this strength that other people were really surprised by, even the boys.
Detectives bring Emily down to the station for questioning.
She's wearing a very short blouse, and it exposes her waist. And I'm thinking about the position that we found Dana Laskowski in, and it would have taken torso strength. And I can see the muscles along the side of Emily's spine in the small of her back. She's very muscular. And I'm now more convinced that she could be the offender.
Detective Bramhall confronts Emily with reports of her involvement in Dana's murder.
She puts her hands on the table, she puts her head back, and her eyes go side to side. And then she comes forward very angrily and she says, those people are lying. And I said, oh really, Emily? All those people are lying.
You're seriously driving me insane. I didn't murder Dana Laskowski or whatever. No, there's no way it was me.
There's no way.
No.
And at that point, I was very persuaded that this is the murderer.
Police drill down on Emily, asking where she was when Dana was killed.
Emily and Amanda had told us that they were in a party at the time that Dana was murdered.
I was completely high out of my brain, and I was with Amanda like the whole time.
I found out that Emily and Amanda left the party at the same time another individual left the party. The other individual drove a given distance and made a purchase. We got that receipt, so we had the time that Emily and Amanda had left the party around midnight. It was possible they made it to Dana's house before 1 a.m.
So they have information that they're concealing? They're likely involved in the crime? So what happened here? Could Emily be the killer?
With the circumstantial evidence stacking up against Emily Lauenborg in the Dana Laskowski murder case, police are granted a search warrant for the room she's renting.
One of the things that they found in Emily's room was a diary or a journal. And it had some of the typical stuff you'd expect from a 17-year-old girl. but it had a couple of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. One was the bucket list, and one of the things on the list was to kill somebody and get away with it.
Then, police uncover another crucial piece of evidence.
There was an entry where she was angry at Amanda and wrote in there that she felt like strangling Amanda the way she'd strangled her aunt.
This shocking revelation confirms Emily's guilt.
Emily's diaries talk about committing the homicide, strangling Dana, wanting to possibly strangle her niece Amanda in a similar way. And in my mind, that speaks to somebody who wants to dominate people, somebody who's getting self-esteem and power from committing such offenses, or even just knowing that should she want to, she's capable of doing it.
I confronted her with the entry in the diary, and I said, look, I could strangle her, referring to Amanda, just like her aunt. She says, well, it doesn't say I could strangle her just like I strangled her aunt.
Now, Dana, we found strangled to death in her house. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thing is, we hadn't disclosed strangulation as the cause of death. So, she was booked, held for $500,000 bail, and I could begin the investigation of Emily as the offender, the murderer of Dana Liskowski.
Detective Bramhall questions Amanda again, this time confronting her about the lies she's been telling about the night of Dana's murder.
And I said, what happened? And Amanda said, I don't know, I wasn't there. Why was Amanda misleading us?
I'm curious as to why you didn't tell me when you first met.
So scared of her. I was afraid that I would get hurt too.
You said you cared so much about your Auntie Dana, but you led us on a wild goose chase. I list all the points where she has lied.
It doesn't take long before Amanda cracks under the pressure, telling detectives everything she knows.
Before we even got there, Emily had said, oh, I want some money, we need money, and I had agreed. When we walked in the living room, Dana was up and awake, and she was surprised to see us, and, and was like, hey, Dana, we need money, and she had said that she didn't have any cash on her, and, I was really fine with that, but, Emily, come on, Dana, just anything, we really need help, We knew that she had some change and some dollars in a cabinet, and Dana was getting really irritated because we were high, and I'm sure we were jittery, and we started getting really upset and being really rude to Dana, so Dana wanted us to leave, and she kind of, put her hand on Emily to, push her out, and Emily didn't like that, and she wasn't having it, and she kept pushing Dana, and I kind of, walked back a little bit, because I didn't want to get involved, and I was yelling at him to stop, and all I heard was a little, gagging noises, and gagging noises, and I saw Emily was house.
Then Amanda says, Emily strangled my aunt right in front of my eyes. Sorry I didn't tell you earlier.
The fact that Amanda watches Emily murder her aunt and does nothing, I think either speaks to the fact that she too was afraid of Emily, or this happened so quickly that she probably didn't even realize what she was witnessing, and that's not uncommon.
With Amanda's cooperation, investigators are now able to fill in the final hours of Dana's life.
That night, Emily and Amanda had left the party around midnight. Then they made it to Dana's house before 1 a.m. They came in the back door. They were on drugs. Dana was on the couch in the living room. They went in to try to get some money. Dana said, I'm not going to give you any money. And Emily said, I want some money. And then there was a point where Dana said, enough, You girls are going to have to leave. And Dana stood up and she touched Emily, and Emily exploded. And then Emily attacked her and strangled Dana Laskowski.
Amanda watched Emily attack Dana, and Amanda yelled at her to stop, but it was too late.
It was over. The scream that the neighbor reported hearing at 1 o'clock on the night that Dana was murdered turned out not to be Dana's scream, but rather Amanda's scream.
Emily then positions Dana's body on the couch under blankets.
They grabbed a few dollars that Dana had around and got out of there.
On the way out, Emily stops and takes some of Dana's clothing.
Emily attended the funeral of Dana. She wore these clothes to the funeral. This was her display of power and dominance. I wore these clothes because I can. Look at what I did. I may describe her best as somebody who's a fledgling psychopath. She was young. Typically, psychopaths are adults. It takes several years for behavior to develop. We clearly see there's a pattern here of conduct disorder, and then there's a murder.
The one unanswered question plaguing investigators is motive.
Emily told her friends, well, Amanda kept ditching me for her aunt, and Emily specifically said she was not sorry she killed Dana.
Perhaps Emily wanted to kill Dana to have Amanda all to herself. Amanda, she was reportedly close to Dana. It's entirely possible that she killed Dana as a message to Amanda. Amanda was present when this occurred. So what message is that sending to Amanda? I've done this and now I can do this to you?
Despite her role in Dana's murder, Amanda is given a plea deal and sees no prison time.
We had a lot of discussion about what we're going to do with Amanda. We certainly had her for robbery, but I felt that we needed her as a witness because she witnessed the murder, and if we charged her with a crime, she'd have the right to remain silent. So we decided that we were going to treat her as a witness.
With Amanda's testimony, Emily Lauenborg is charged with the murder of Dana Laskowski, but her case never goes in front of a jury.
Emily pled a Newton plea wherein she does not admit guilt. She just admits if she were to go to trial, there would be enough evidence to convict her. Emily was convicted for manslaughter in the first degree. She received a sentence of about 7 years.
After serving just 5.5 years in prison, Emily is released in 2008. She moves back to Puyallup, gets married, and has children.
This case was a genuine whodunit. Most of the murders we go to, we know exactly what happened even before we get there. This one, we didn't understand going into it, but we were able to get on the right path to get this solved, and I'm glad to bring it to light. It was my job to do it, and I did my job.
This case was complicated because there was a lot of emotion, and there was a lot of personal connections with everyone involved, and this was a terrible tragedy. A woman, a mother, an aunt, who shouldn't have died that night. And then a 17-year-old girl who killed her, who shouldn't have killed her that night. And no matter what the justice system does, it doesn't bring Dana back.
Everybody loved Dana, and she is out of the life of her father, of her mother, and her kids are triplets. They were 8 years old at the time, and they grew up without her. So this is not justice, but in murder, nobody good wins.